All right, Chris, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Appreciate your
man.
time, bro.
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. Well, I'm Chris Lundgren. I am the National Sales Director for Dosatron and Dilution Solutions. It's just a fancy title. All that means is that I do a little bit of everything, everything from sales to development to, um, you know, working on the cultivation side, making sure cultivators know how to use our products. So education is obviously incredibly important to us, just like it is to you. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure cultivators know what we're doing, you know.
Have
So
you ever been on a podcast? Is this your first
nah,
one?
this is my first one, man.
First one? Right on,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Pretty exciting actually.
Yeah, this would be awesome. And
Yeah.
when we're on the phone, it comes across so natural. We're just talking. And sometimes I'm listening to hearing you talk. I'm like, man, this stuff is gold. Some
Yeah.
of the stuff that we get into. So hopefully this is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
What's your background in cannabis and horticulture in general?
Yeah. So for me, horticulture started as a career simply out of my love for cannabis. So, for me, I started growing. I moved out of my mom's house at 19. I was turning packs for some cats up in the hills, working at a restaurant, and turning those packs fast enough where they're like, if you move out of your mom's house, we'll set you up with a house. And I remember my first, it was three 1,000 bat wings, as we call them, right? The old
Adjust wings.
adjust wings, yeah. And I got 3,000s and a 1/400 metal halide, and this was in '99. And moved, literally got the house, started paying rent, and then had to go home and tell my mom I'm moving out. So for me, it was about starting simply out of need, necessity, truly. And that's because I wanted to be a rock star, dude. I had every intent of being a professional musician, and I played heavy metal music back then. It was very much like Pantera, thick, heavy screaming, and that's not music you make money on, and that music just costs you money. So, real quickly, I realized that turning packs was great. I mean, I bought us an RV, I bought everybody equipment, started buying, essentially being able to make it so that let's just call it my band members were early 20s, man. We were all partying, and they were all working at restaurants or working construction. And so for me, I knew I had to have income in order to make our dream happen. And so that's where cannabis came from in my life, man. It was, of course I loved it. I mean, I started at a fairly young age, having more than just an appreciation for it, right? Because of how it helped me balance, find balance. And so, fast forward to this opportunity, and these cats, they just straight up gave me, in the Colorado kids don't know what I'm talking about, it was skunk six. And so they brought this strain from the hills, set me up at the house. And I'm telling you, it was crazy because I lived across the street from a cop and next to a cop. And I didn't know when I got this house, right? I just got it for the basement. And I didn't know anything about smell control. I knew nothing about nothing.
Well, in
I,
1999, there's a lot of people that didn't know a lot of
oh,
things.
dude, I didn't know about air circulation. I didn't know how hot I was going to get down there. I knew nothing. All I thought was slap these lights up, put some plants under, ebb and flood tables on some hydroton, and just, turn it on. And sure, veg, it crushed. Like I was so stoked in veg. And then I got my week one flower. And I don't know if you guys remember the skunk strains, but dude, like from down the street, I'd go walk my dog and I'd come up walking up the street and I'd be like, what is that? That's my house, And so, yeah, those are the days listen to some of the other guys and go through their history. Those are the days, man.
Yeah.
Like I wish I could bottle that shit up and just every once in a while take a swig, because those were the days. There was so much adrenaline, helicopters fly over your house and you'd go turn off all the lights thinking that was going to matter. Your heat profile was already there. Like that would matter anyway. But yeah, man. So that's how I got in. I mean, it was a necessity for me. I felt like it was the only way I could fulfill my dream, And so got into that, started growing skunk six, and I mean, I fell in love, dude. I knew nothing about plants, about growing plants. I never had grown a plant or done anything in my life like that. I lived in apartments all my life, with my mom's. So yeah, that was a moment that it changed my whole. It was almost like I thought music was everything to me, and then I found plants. And then it was actually, music became secondary. This was my number one passion, growing. And then I became the kid that was, all these guys would be like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I actually read George Cervantes' book. Like, unlike you fools, you're just taking the advice from the guy that taught you how to grow.
Yeah.
I'm out here trying to learn. And then, honestly, where it all also shifted for me and why you know me today is because I met my wife, and she was her dad at the time. I had no idea. I met her through homies, and we became friends first. And she was dating a friend of mine, and I was dating a friend of hers. And long story short, we started dating. And what happened was, she wanted me to go meet her dad. And my wife has an incredibly large family, right? I'm not even going to say it on the podcast because she'll kick me, but she's got a huge family, right? Big Dutch family. And she's like, my dad has a greenhouse. And I'm not kidding, Brandon. I thought of the little hoop houses in front of King Soopers, like in front of Safeway. That's what I thought of. I was like, a greenhouse? And this dude makes coin? Like, how does he have a greenhouse and make coin, right? How does he sustain this huge family? So anyway, we go to meet him, and we pull over this hill out in the hills of Colorado. And I thought it was a lake. I was like, yo, there's a lake out here? And my wife's like, a lake? What are you talking about? That's my dad's greenhouse. And it was just the reflection of the sun off the glass. It looked like a lake because you came over this hill, and it was kind of like in a valley, right? Beautiful location, man. I still love where that greenhouse is. It was one of the best parts of working there, was driving there every morning. But anyway, so I met my father-in-law, walked in, and my father-in-law is actually a company called Cherry Creek Systems, is an automated irrigation company. And so he had invented like multiple of the various technologies that were being used in this greenhouse. And so I'm at home in this little 4x8 flood tables, right? And the floors are flooding, bro. The entire floors are flooding. He's got Rockwool tomato starts, 500,000 of them on one side of the greenhouse. And on the other side, he's got bedding plants. So like the stuff you buy at Home Depot, Lowe's, all that stuff, right? And I walk in, and these hanging basket machines that he invented, and these boom irrigation that he invented. And I'm just walking around going, what is this? This is what I want to do with my life. And my wife's like, you better not, dude. Because she grew up in the farm life. I mean, at 8 years old, she's out at the greenhouse staking tomatoes, so she grew up like, this is hard work. You don't want this. And sure enough, I started working for her dad shortly thereafter.
How old were you?
And I was 21.
Oh, so it was like you had a 2-year growing in a basement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you go into this Mecca. And you're just blown.
Yeah.
At 21, I would have been tripping.
Oh, I was tripping. It was 6 acres under glass, completely automated. And so, yeah, I was tripping. And it gave me, it was weird because I'd go home every night, and I'd have this deeper passion every day I got home because I'd learned something at the greenhouse. And I'm telling you, I feel so blessed looking back because my father-in-law gave me opportunities to be with people that are legends in the growing world, not our growing world, right? But the traditional horticulture growing world. And it's funny because I remember asking questions about PPM, and they were like, why do you care about PPM? Right? Because that's how we talked in the basement, right? But then these fools all talked about EC, right? So everything was, it was, they could see, back then, I don't think they figured it out. But in hindsight, I was obvious, dude. I was going home being like taking, all the natural stuff, like the old oxidizing products, and taking all that stuff home, trying to use it in my grow to sterilize my tools. That's where I became such a fanatic for sterilization, right? Because we also did tomato grafting. So tomato grafting gave me a whole new realm of what it could be to do cuts, right? And so we would have to take the cutting from one particular plant that had already rooted, and then another plant that had rooted, and essentially the root stock from one plant was super vigorous, and we wanted the fruit from the other one. So we took the fruit from the top of this one and put it on the root stock of that one,
and graft it together by tying it together, kind of like
there were these little rubber clips, right? And you put these little rubber clips around the stem, right?
What does that do? That takes the fruit from the other plant and puts it into the root zone of the other?
Yeah, so tomatoes specifically at this time. So you know what it's like, you know, in this world of genetic hunting and breeding, what we've been through and how often we find some favorable qualities, some unfavorable qualities, right? And what tomatoes were doing at the time, cucumbers, a lot of other you know, food crops were doing this at the time. They were taking the best of each. So they realized that real quickly the automated irrigation could drive a tomato to be delicious tomato, but it would underproduce because Pythium was rampant. It was everywhere, right? And that was just watering strategies, which I think we've perfected, you know, miles over some of those guys at this point.
Back then on irrigation strategies, what were they already doing what we're talking about now? But back when you were 21, were they already on everything that we're doing now in cannabis with irrigation strategy?
In a different way, yes, yes, yeah. They were pushing the envelope back then with drybacks, which we didn't call them drybacks back then,
What were they called?
but that was just your curve. It was just your
the
curve. So you were trying to maintain your curve within a particular height and low, right? And then we would have extremes, right? So you try to dry. So specifically to increase sugar production, you try to do some drybacks, and you need higher calcium levels and more air movement in order to do that. You have too high of air movement, not enough calcium, you actually get browning and curling of the leaves, right? So anyway, with all that, that's why we did this grafting, is because this root structure would be weak. And so we'd take a healthy root structure and we put it with the fruit that we really wanted. And there was one root stock back then. It was called a maxifort. And every single plant that was grafted had a maxifort, because a maxifort had huge, vibrant roots. I'm talking 3-4 days, it would be popping out of the bottom of a 4x4 after transplanting.
Why is it called a maxifort?
That was just the name of the variety.
Oh, the variety of
that would have
tomato.
this root stock. It had an ugly fruit, big, huge fruit that would split because it'd grow these gigantic fruits, right? But they would split every time. So people realized, well, this maxifort root base was just phenomenal. It transferring the nutrients up the stalk to the plant. Just did an amazing job. So anyway, that maxifort became the staple, and then we'd put all these different, you know, essentially varieties, genetics on top of them. So that's really where I got into. That's why I'm so particular about propagation. Why I feel everything starts with propagation. And I will say, when I've, you know, walked many a facility, 90% of problems, I can literally walk into the propagation or mother room and go, it starts right here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
So anyway, that's where that passion kind of came from.
With the grafting, what's the life cycle of the tomato plant? You couldn't do that with cannabis. I mean, since the life cycle's so short, right?
It's one of those many questions I've asked myself. The reason I think it could potentially be possible. So to answer your first question, let me go back. You actually asked the life cycle of the tomato
what's
plant.
The life
About
cycle?
9 months, can be as much as 12. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures or been to a tomato greenhouse. You'll see the vines kind of wrap around the bottom of the gutter, and they come back and come back and come back. It's because they essentially harvest the fruit or the cluster or whatever particular, you know, whether it's beefsteak, it's cluster, it's Roma. They pull them all down, and then they bring that plant back up down, and then they let the vine crawl, kind of go around that gutter, right, or up and back and forth. Mm-hmm. And the reason they do that is they're trying to continue to take apical growth, right? So they're trying to keep the apex strong and just keep it going up and up and up and fruiting and flowering. And you get to a certain point where it's kind of diminishing returns.
It's about 9 months.
Yeah, so it ends up about 9 months.
And how does the fruiting work? Is it like with cannabis, light cycles, or you just do natural light cycles?
Natural light cycles. You can do some light manipulation to keep it vegetative. But once it starts flowering, it's on its way.
Okay.
And typically it's all about pollination at that point. So that's why you'll see specifically cucumbers and tomatoes, which most of my experience is in. You'll notice bees everywhere in those greenhouses, and it's because cross pollination is incredibly important. There's no male female separate plants, right? It's all about cross pollination.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So being 21, walking into that greenhouse, you started
Dude,
working there right away.
I did very shortly after. I was assistant kitchen manager at Buca di Beppo. Like I said, aspiring rock star. It's funny. I laugh about it now, but and trying to do my thing. Trying to make my way. And man, I had no idea that this was my new gig, right? At the time, I just was hard work, and I was trying to learn as much because I was really trying to take it home and apply it. So for me, it was all about the application.
Yeah,
It
you got
wasn't.
fast tracked
Oh,
through all.
100%, Brandon.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it was. There was a time where, like I said, I was with some of the minds that, like, you know how I'm passionate about water treatment. You know how I'm passionate about just water in general. All that came from these minds that I was exposed to. There's this trade show that you know as Cultivate now,
Mhm.
right? Which used to be called the OFA course, the Ohio Floriculture Association short course. And I took these classes that fast tracked me. I took them 3 years in a row, and you would go for like 4 days and like 12 hours a day. You would just learn, right? And it was MSU, OSU, all these huge universities at the time, Florida State, Florida University, or University of Florida, I'm sorry, and all these big horticulture programs. And they came in and brought their top dudes and to teach, because their whole thing was trying to get a next generation on, which is still the biggest concern in agriculture, by the way, is that we continually need to get younger and younger bodies in here because it continues to age and we don't see a lot of new young people in. But back then, they were really a push for it. And I was just fortunate to be in these positions, to go to these classes and to learn what I got to learn from some of the greats, man.
I think cannabis probably has a massive influence on getting younger generation into horticulture in general.
That is, one of the hardest parts of being on the upside of 2020 was knowing that there was going to be a downside. All of us, right? We all knew, like, an upswing comes, there's a bubble has to burst at some point, right?
Yeah.
But the greatest part about this is the young generations are going to want to keep growing something.
Mm-hmm.
And, my greatest prediction or hope is that if there is a downturn in our industry and there are people that have to shut their doors, which, I'm sad about, because I believe in the mom and pop, and I believe in things coming up from grassroots. But because we know that's going to happen, what that tells me is that there's going to be a lot of places to grow some great food. And one of the greatest struggles we're going to have in the West is water. And what are we really good at with cannabis? Using just a little bit of water to do a lot of great things. So, I think that technology that exists there is going to circle back,
Yeah.
and start growing food. And so I think our next generation is going to be our cannabis guys. I think that some of our greatest food producers will have said, yeah, I cut my teeth with cannabis.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Was it cultivating plants that drove you, or was it the cannabis plant that drove you? Because I meet a lot of different people, and it's different for each individual.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think for me, it's actually a mixture of both, but I think it's just plants. And why? Because, I travel a lot now, so I don't get to have a home garden anymore. But I still have like 120 indoor plants. Like, I can't not grow something, because there's just something to be said about specifically cannabis, because it grows so fast.
Mm.
From that time that you took a cutting, or a clone, and you see that come to fruition, there's just this feeling of accomplishment that there's just about nothing else on earth that gives you that, outside of being a father,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I just love growing plants, but my passion for cannabis, it drives my desire to want to see something grow. And then, because obviously on the backside, there's a hidden element there that, obviously consumption is important to me. And I'm picky. That we've talked about that many a time, right? Like, I don't, I appreciate all the samples I get along my travels, but not always is it something that it's exactly going to hit where I want it to hit, right? And I don't smoke all day, every day, but when I do, I want to enjoy it. It's like someone that drinks a good wine. And so, yeah, I think I'm passionate for cannabis, but man, I just love growing plants.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I'm really passionate about cultivation in general, especially greenhouse cultivation is where my heart lies for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And that's when we met. That's kind of what sparked us off.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, you know about greenhouse. I'm opening a greenhouse in
Yeah,
Reno. Like,
I talk to you, I bug you nonstop probably about greenhouse
it was
questions.
great though, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that was to me the turning point, you know?
There's just something about a greenhouse that I love. I love that it's designed to cultivate plants. I love working inside the greenhouse. I love designing it. I love building it. It's just a special place to work.
Yeah.
And especially light assisted greenhouse with HPS.
Mm.
That's where I've really seen some of the best flower I've seen come out is HPS greenhouse, fully climate controlled, wet wall, 5 foot tall, 6-inch thick wet wall, with HPS flower, and it's just insane.
There's something to be said about the profiles that come off of the UV light from the sun.
Yep.
I mean, you've been in lighting. You know how hard that is to replicate without making it almost toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, the greenhouse, as we call it, light depth concept with the actual lights in the greenhouses, you're 100% right.
Yeah. It's special. When you started back when you were 21 in that large 6-acre greenhouse, what did you start doing? Like, what was your job?
I started picking up flats and putting my father-in-law was a no nonsense. You prove yourself. You start from the bottom. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. I picked up flats and put them on. And that's where I learned a little bit of my, the terrible Spanish that I do know. Was just standing next to the ladies working, and they just loved it. I'm sitting there cruising along, and back then you had headphones. You didn't have earbuds, right? My headphones on and crank away and just pick up flats. And then my brother-in-law actually came to me and was like, hey, man, because I kept asking about watering, and I was like, hey, next time, can I watch you program the boom? These booms are these, irrigation, like robots is one way of looking at it, right? And I'm like, let me watch you program that. So to see, for him to see that in me, he was like, why don't you come put a hose in your hand? And so did that. And then, again, man, I just feel sometimes I look back, I pinch myself because, from there, my father-in-law continued to just drive me. He would, you're going to go into production. You're going to go into growing. You're going to go into IPM. You're going to go into this. Oh, and by the way, I'm selling this greenhouse. You want to come work at the automation company? And so that was also another turning point for me. So I spent about 5 years in the greenhouse. And at this point, I'm
still growing on the side.
Still growing. Oh yeah.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Always.
Yeah. At this point, I think I had about 4 houses between all the homies.
There you go.
Yeah. And he kept just kind of driving me, trying to push me forward. And he comes to me and says, I'm selling this greenhouse. And I just become head grower. And so like I had hit what I thought was going to be my pinnacle. This is what I was going to do. I was going to be a grower. And whether it was for my father-in-law or anyone else, I was going to be a head grower. That was it. And head grower to me was like,
that's it.
That was it. That was that moment. Right. And he comes to me, he goes, I'm going to sell this greenhouse. I'm like, no, what? You're going to sell it? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to sell it. Do you want to come work for my other business? And I said, nah. Who you selling to? He told me, and I was like, I'll just stay on. He's like, okay, all right. Well, you stay on. That's fine. He was good with it. That was a trip, man. Going to another company, working for my father-in-law, and kind of being, let's be honest, I had a little bit of privilege, like, nepotism, if you will. Yeah. Like I was dating his daughter. I hadn't quite married her yet. But I got some nepotism out of it. And then this other company came in and they gave me so much respect, Brandon. Like I still have mad love for those people because they gave me so much respect right off the bat. And so they let me keep my position and run the greenhouse for a few years. And then there was just a day I had been back to the greenhouse. We used to get these calls at like 3:00 in the morning from the boiler, stupid boiler in the middle of the, winter. It's 4 degrees outside. I got to keep the plants warm and the whole place is just hot water heat. So, boilers calling me at 3:00 in the morning. And I'm telling you, for like every day for like 3 weeks. And my wife's like, this is ridiculous. You got to fix that stupid boiler. I'm like, I'm trying, but I don't know how to fix a boiler. Like, from the core out, it was a problem. So I looked at her. I was like, all right. And I went out to dinner with her dad that like within that time period, and he offered it again. And I said, no, I don't think I want that job. And my brother-in-law decided to buy that greenhouse from those people. So I was going to be his head grower. Well, that didn't work out. That was quick, man. That was like 60 days. My brother-in-law and I love each other, but didn't work well together. So then,
So he did buy it.
Yeah, he did buy it. Yeah, he took it over. And sure enough, yeah, man, that was it. That's when I finally went back to my father-in-law. I was like, all right, let's do this. And so I went to Cherry Creek Systems. And that's where I will say that's where I cut my teeth. Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot of when I can walk cultivation. It's a combination of working at home and working at the greenhouse all day. So my cultivation knowledge is all stems from those years, right? But my love for irrigation, fertigation, it stemmed from Cherry Creek Systems. And so I came in sales. He literally fired like 6 people the week before I got there. Company was in tatters. He had just kind of gone away and was running tomatoes and running all these. This dude had like 6 businesses throughout the U.S. and just kind of running them and going all over the place, and multiple businesses with his brothers and all this stuff going on. Well, I took that pretty quickly into, man, this is what I want to do. I mean, I'm telling you, I fell for plants when I found automation. I was a new passion, man. So went through that, and that was another really huge precipice in my life, turning point.
What did Cherry Cook, right?
Cherry Creek
Cherry
Systems.
Creek. What did it do?
Irrigation automation.
Okay.
So it did these traveling boom systems. Have you ever seen in a greenhouse? These they ride on rails and they ride through the greenhouse and spray over the top of the crop. So he took that had kind of already been in play, but he took that and took it to the next level, and then invented this thing called the Echo, which is like a ski lift for plants. So it carries the plants on the truss around essentially a big giant cable car system. And so that's what we sold. And bro, because I loved it so much, just crushed. Came into a company that was like $4 million in debt, doing like $1.5 million a year. Because my brother-in-law, one of my other brothers-in-law had left the company like 3-4 years before that and started his own company out in Maryland. This is the guy that owns SunMed Growers out in Maryland right now. And when he left, the company just kind of, I mean, I love you guys, but it went to shit. And so I was able to just timing. I came in, that industry is coming back from a little bit of a recession, and just crushed it, dude. Did $4 million my first year.
Do you think that you were so successful in that position because you understood the problems that the growers were having?
Absolutely. I was the guy that all these R&D, when they bring a new controller into these systems, I was the guy that tested them all out. So I was doing all the work in the greenhouse. So I could get on the phone and talk to a grower at the time and be like, oh, I bet this is what you deal with your irrigation within your baskets or with your flats or versus pots. And so because I spoke like a grower,
it's exactly it.
That was it.
It's so important.
That was it.
I think that a lot of the reasons why Lux and some of the companies that we work on are so successful is because of the exact same reason.
Mm-hmm.
We understand our problems as cultivators, and we know how to fix the problems, or we figure out ways. We don't always know how, but we figure out ways to fix problems for cultivators, and then we share that fix.
Yeah.
And you're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was a great opportunity. So, and then from there, spent, almost 8 years with him doing Cherry Creek. And then, really, family business is tough. So, actually, the family at Dosatron, we were sitting down. So Leela and Pam, so Leela is Pam's mom, and Pam, and we're sitting down and just having a drink, eating some food. And I was just kind of like, oh, you guys are in a family business. Can I just like vent a little bit, ask you questions? And sure enough, then that night they told me, hey, if you ever just need like a home, just know we got your back. I didn't know my worth at that time. I just knew what I loved to do. So anyway, that fast forward to that, I decided to leave family company, took the opportunity with Dosatron. And yeah, man, that was 8 years ago. And here I am today.
Was Leela running the company at that time?
Yeah, so Leela, the whole reason they brought me on is they wanted me to kind of be Leela's successor. And Pam was, I would give her like, they're not big on titles at Dosatron, but she was like the general manager at the time. And came onto the company, and then, man, I feel like it was like a blink of an eye. I came on, I knew the product very, very well because I sold Dosatrons on the Cherry Creek booms. So I had a lot of experience with Dosatron. I used them as a grower, right? Never used them in my basement. Didn't really cross relate that at that time. I won't lie. I didn't have Dosatrons in my basement. In hindsight, I could have crushed had I, but took that time and that experience with moving over to Dosatron and having time with Leela on the road for that first year and watching her. Man, she was the relationship queen. Everybody knew her. Everybody knew what she would walk into a place and people would come with open arms. And so to learn that, so I knew the cultivation, I knew all the stuff, but I didn't understand that interrelationships. So to watch that and to see that was a huge, huge influence on me too. And then real quick, she was happy with what I was doing, and she started to step down, and Pam stepped up. And yeah, man, that's really how Pam and I started, building the ship together.
So Leela was the CEO.
Leela is the president.
The president now.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
Pam is still the general manager? Or
No, she's the CEO now.
Okay. It's pretty rad that it's a woman-owned and ran company.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's Leela and her husband that own it. And their story's pretty cool. We could do a whole nother podcast on their story. Yeah. It's dope. But essentially, Dosatron started as a livestock medicator. And so, Dosatron, everybody gives Leela the credit for why Dosatron is in horticulture. So 35 years ago, she used to drive around with the thing in her trunk and go to greenhouses along with her husband, Eddie, and they drive to greenhouses and, show people how this thing worked.
That's rad.
Water powered, cool. Dude. It was mind blowing. People are like, water powered?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that started. And I was brought on to essentially take over Leela's shoes. And then that's when I'm living in Colorado. They don't know anything. I told them nothing about my cannabis, right? Because all of my life, I lived two separate lives. I was cannabis and rockstar.
Oh, they didn't know that you were going cannabis on the side.
They had no idea.
Well, yeah, I got to remember. There was like a point about 2014. I think it become anytime before 2014, you didn't talk about what you did in the basement.
Dude, my band members didn't know. The only people that knew, my brother didn't know, my best friends didn't know, nobody knew. They just thought I turned really super fire weed. Yeah, they didn't realize I grew it.
It seems like there was a transition around 2013, 14, 15, where it was more you could talk about in conversation. But prior to that,
no. Man, I could have lost my entire job, my career. My father-in-law was not cool with it. None of my in-laws were cool with it. No, man, I was in a very, and traditional horticulture is incredibly conservative.
Yeah.
It's farmers. They live the farm life, man. Simple life. They're not looking to be, on this side of the world. So it was a no. I didn't talk about it. Nobody knew. I started, they had no idea. I'm living in Colorado and Pam's like talking about cannabis and I'm like, oh, I might know a little bit of something or something.
Yeah, you didn't tell girlfriends, you didn't tell your band members, you didn't.
No.
Yeah,
we jammed in my basement next to my grow room, and they were just like, dude, I'd light incense and then smoke a bowl right before they got there so that it smelled like weed, burned weed. They'd be like, dude, it always smells like fire in here. I was like, I know, I got a couple packs and under the couch or whatever. I just the story was there, and they told me years later. They're like, we thought you were up to something because there's always fans. Like we could hear fans,
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody knew.
When was it that Dosatron put the D14 MZ2 and the D3000 together to really dose in line with fertilizer in the cannabis game? Like what year was that?
Well, I actually have to predate myself. and it actually started with that little D25. You remember the little square top, the
Yeah.
little unit?
Uh-huh.
It looks little in comparison to the D14. That unit, actually, I got to give credit where credit's due. That was Easy Feed Systems. That was a cat, Gabe, out of San Francisco, out of the Bay Area, that started that whole thing in 2012.
Now, was he a customer? Or was
He was a customer.
Wow.
He was a customer. He figured it out. He like bought he figured out which ones to use at which ratios at what. Like the dude was a G. He brought that concept to Pam, and Pam's like, "Yeah, run with it. Yeah, you're
Well,
gonna."
give it a
She
go.
would do it. Yeah, she
Yeah.
did marketing. She was. I mean, Pam. She's like she'll work, right? And so she put in the work with Gabe. Went out to the Bay, like back in the day where they would practically blindfold you and take you places.
Mm-hmm.
And she went and saw grows and did the thing with Gabe. And so actually, I got to give the dude credit. That's where it started.
What does he have Instagram now, or is he known?
No, dude, he was a man of the hills.
Yeah,
and he started this business, did this thing. It was called Oakland Farm and Feed. Autumn Carsey and I have talked many a days about this Oakland Farm and Feed because that's where she got her first Dosatron.
It's a hydro store, or just
it was like
garden store?
It was like a hydro store. No, it was a hydro store, but he was trying to be like a nursery store. Like he was trying to be more traditional horticulture and not like your bro dude man place, right?
Yeah.
So he was really trying
kind of like a Grand Jettos.
Exactly.
A mix. Yeah.
Right. But definitely not quite embedded like that. But yeah, so he did that for a while and then just ran into some trouble. Got, had to kind of do his shit, do his time. And when that happened, I happened to start with a company. He was kind of on this, like, what's called broken wing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I looked at Pam and I was like, hey, let me go to these Max Yield shows. And I had been reading Max Yield.
Did
for
she
years.
still know at this point that you were growing weed? Or you were growing weed?
So she's like, well, these people are very particular and they kind of need someone that's like one of them. And I was like, all right, well, here's what's up.
You dropped it.
I did. And a little bit, not even like still to this day, I don't exactly talk about it at grandiose scale because I still have it in me that I'm not supposed to. Like I still have it in me just hearing some of the stories that come off of this show and other like shows. I hear people in their stories and I'm like, man, you're ballsy to tell that. And I know we're in 2022. I know you can tell it, but I still have it in me where I'm like, I mean, I remember at Max Yield, we had a booth and people would come up and they'd be talking and I'd still be like doing the behind my shoulder look because it didn't feel natural. Now, I mean, fast forward now, obviously I talk about it. I'm here talking about it, right?
Yeah.
But this is the most I've ever really like publicly talked about this because it was embedded in me that you just kept your freaking mouth shut. That's the only way you didn't go to prison.
Yeah. What year was that when Gabe kind of introduced that to Dosatron?
That was 2012.
Wow.
Yeah, that was 2012. And then I started in 2013.
Okay. So I was like, our relationship was real fresh in the game. Like we met in 13, 14, right?
14.
Yeah, 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, whoa.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, I seemed like I know what I was doing, but I was still figuring it out, bro.
That's crazy. So when did Ivan get the Dosatron in his, how did that work out? How did you meet Ivan?
So that was, so as I'm, Pam goes, get it, dude, go get it. Like prove this. Cause at the time we were, Easy Feed was doing like 100K. And she was like, it's obvious going to be do something, like go do this. So I'm in Colorado and I'm like, all right, well, I'll go dig in. I don't even know where to start. Cause all I knew was forums and fucking, Cannabis Culture magazine, like in High Times, like I didn't know where do I start? So, I started with some people that had called in, and asked questions about growing tomatoes. Right. And so I did that. And then that's where I realized that forums, cause I'm going back to the forums and be like, how can I use this professionally? And how do I come off like who I was in the forums and like become somebody else and have any street cred? And so that's where Instagram came in. And Instagram, I was like anti-social media. I had no Facebook. I was one of those people like, because I lived in the traditional market so long, I didn't want anyone to know who I was. And so, so that's where Instagram came in. So I got an Instagram account. I decided to call it Chris.Dosatron. I was like, well, I'll put my name at least and I'll put what I do. instead of something like, Rebel Grower or whatever. I just thought, keep it simple. At the time, I hashtag Dosatron. There were 5 images. 2 of them were Dosatron. 3 of them were an actual espresso machine that's called a Dosatron. And so there was 2 images, and one of them was Ivan's, and I liked it. And I said, sick installation. Let me know if you need it. Never needed assistance. 15 minutes, dude. The little bubbles pop up. Well, this is before the bubbles, right? But it pops up. Hey, man, if you're ever in the area, I'd love for you to come by. I have some questions. Here's my number. So I call him up. He just says, I'm Ivan. I don't know what a Jungle Boy is. I have no idea. I don't know he's influential. I don't know that Ivan is Jack, from the THC forums. Like, I didn't know who he was. And so, I flew out there, sat down with him, walked the grow, went and played with the system a little bit, taught his growers how to use it. Because that was kind of his thing. He's like, I know how to use it, but the guy that really knew how to use it left. So will you kind of come show me what's up? Oh, yeah. Showed him what's up. Again, I still didn't know what it was. And then he posts something about Dosatron, and all of a sudden I got like 500 followers overnight. Boom. And I was like, whoa. And then I go on his account and I'm like, oh, I mean, it started clicking, right? And it's funny because I look back and I feel like it's such a kid going into it, but I had no idea. And then from there, our relationship blossomed to where he realized that by being the dude, and this is what's the greatest thing about Ivan, is he realized by being the guy that's willing to share information, it gives him validity and it gives him weight and it gives him context in the conversation. And so many people back then were like, oh, I'm doing something special. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
Ivan was like, blew the doors off of that and
Ivan's
said,
like,
no.
This is what's up.
Everything, this is how I'm successful. Maybe he kept some top end tier tweaks.
Yeah.
I don't think he did, bro. I think he told people just about everything.
Yeah.
And it's something that I will die appreciating about Ivan. That dude gave people, just let people in that had no business being in that sense.
Yeah, he gave it away for free.
And so, and then that moment, our relationship just kind of thrived, and I won't act like I was perfect on Johnny on the spot, because, I didn't understand how hard it would be to get a hold of people. And then, it's funny how the tables turned real quick over that.
Get a hold of you. What are you talking about, bro?
The tables turned real quick on that one.
You don't ever answer your phone.
Hey, I do now. I'm much better now.
You do now.
But man, there was a time. There was a time because, bro, I was at a
point. What were you doing?
Dude, I got 130 sometimes, 130 leads at a time. And I'm one person trying to take all these phone calls. And you know how I am. I'm consultative. I'd be on the phone for an hour, 2 hours with each person. Pam finally came to me and was like, dude, you've got to turn and burn some fucking phone calls. You've got to stop teaching everybody how to do. And I think it built a platform that worked, but man, I was inundated. I was overwhelmed, right? But I didn't realize back then how hard it would be to make business happen, because I was used to farmers that, like, they say something and they just do it, right? I wasn't used to the world of, like, you better follow through and you better do your shit and you better do it and you stay on me. Right. And so I just kind of stayed on him, not aggressive, but I stayed on Ivan, and we just built a relationship. Yeah. And, he was always more than gracious. And then he brought us to Chalice. When he calls me up, he goes, hey man, will you send me a system? I'll put it up at Chalice. I was like, yeah. Can I come stand in the booth? He's like, yeah. Really? You would do that?
I was there at that Chalice with
you
guys.
Yeah. That was the first one. And that's where it all changed. That's where it all changed. Like, that's where there was this simplistic approach with a different nutrient company. And there was this simplistic approach. And even though it didn't work right off the bat, because of their formulation, there was definitely that simplistic approach. And Ivan pushed that to happen. He's like, you have to make your formula work for dosers. Yeah. And then when that formula worked for dosers, let's just be honest. That's where everything kind of changed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember I was always a big fanboy of Ivan's, and I'd watch everything he did. So I saw that first post of Dosatron, and I was one of those guys that called you, because I owned Hydroponics Inc. at the time. Yeah. And I was like, send me a system. I want to buy it right now. Like, let's go. Yeah. And I threw it up in my hydro shop, and I get super obsessed with something. If I don't know it, I want to figure it out. So I started putting them
That's for sure.
together. Like I own this hydro shop and I'm in the back. All the employees are in the front running the shop, and I'm putting Dosatrons in together in the back room, just like
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
And what's so crazy is how simple Dosatron is. Because once you put it together, you know the whole thing. You're like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so easy.
Yeah.
And but you just have to put it together to kind of figure it out. And when you see it on the wall, I can see how some growers would get a little scared of it. And guys, I started doing these consultations at the hydro store, and I was like, hey, order your Dosatron, come in, and I'll put it together with you.
Yeah.
Put it
Yeah.
together with
That's what I
me.
loved about you. Yeah.
I'll send it home with you. I
Yeah.
bought these marine boards.
I remember that.
From
Yep.
the boat shop.
Yep.
And they're like these plastic boards. I cut them up, and then I'd be sitting there in the back with customers putting together Dosatrons.
Mm-hmm.
And I became kind of like the Dosatron hydro shop here in Southern California. Like guys would travel from like Yuma, Arizona, like San Diego. Like everybody would come and kind of put together Dosatrons with me.
Mm-hmm.
I even put together a 12 dosing system down in LA. Like I'm going down, and it's 40-gallon minute system.
Oh,
It was a
geez.
40-gallon a minute system.
Oh,
at 12. Remember that?
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was like calling, you were like working me. I had to like, it was so long that I had to go and angle it in the corner and make a big L. And I'm telling the guy, I'm like, hey, I'm working on a new formulation right now. Like you don't need all these bottles. Like you could just do it with like
Sure.
4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
Won't listen to me. But we did it and we sold it. I think it was like a $30,000 Dosatron
Yeah.
system, one
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was it's cool to be a part of that, like a part of that story. It's really neat.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You were early adopter. You know, there were a few people that really dug in and wanted to see where this would go. And you were one of those, bro. And I give you a lot of credit for that. There wasn't a lot of that going on at that time.
Yeah, I think people just got scared of it.
It was intimidating. You know, it's funny because I talked to Kraft about it, right? And Lance says to me, he goes, man, I don't know why you don't tell everybody how easy this is. And I'm like, I've been trying I'm sorry that you don't see the message, but that's what we've been trying to do for many, many years, right? It's hard to do because it's a demonstrative product. You have to see it work. And you've seen all the graphics we put together. We got how it works graphics. We got all these graphics, right? What I didn't do, I put animations, and when I say I speak like it's me, but in the background's constantly Pam, right? It's Pam, right? But we put together some pretty cool graphics, I thought at the time, of the system going together and showing them turn into each other and like, the nipple turning in and how to put the Teflon tape on. But for some reason that was intimidating. What I really realized is I should have just stood in front of a video camera and done it.
Yes.
Because Kraft just did
Yeah.
that and he got so many followers and so
Yeah.
many people call up now. I was like, that's so easy. Why didn't you ever do that? It's
Yeah.
funny what you realize once you see somebody do something that you are so embedded in.
It goes back to that thing where you just got to put it together once.
Yeah.
And you'll have it forever.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. What is your opinion on what size grow can justify the D14 MZ2 and D14 3000? Like what size? How many lights?
Without sounding cheesy, any, right? And why I say that, right, is because Dosatron can be run in so many ways. There's so many ways to skin that cat. Let's just imagine small 6-liter, right? 8-liter. You use a Dosatron. If your flow rates are correct, you're doing all 8 lights, irrigating it as one room, one zone. More than likely, we can get Dosatrons to run, right? But they're mechanical in the fact that they need water to pass through them. You line multiple up. We know there's some, challenges with super low flows. So just fill a batch tank. Come out of a batch tank to any zone. You can do one plant at a time if you want to with a batch tank, right? But the process of repeatability that Dosatron brings is unmatched. There's plenty of dosing systems in this industry. I'm going to tell you one thing. In the last 5 years, the number of dosing systems has 10x'd. Okay. There used to be 3, now there's 30. What I laugh about is that Dosatron's still the continuous provider of perfection. It continues to be that repeatable result time after time after time. And the reason being is just because of the simplicity. It doesn't have all this extra to it. Run water through it, it does its job. So go to a batch tank. So to answer your question, I know it sounds salesy, but go to a batch tank, fill a 55-gallon drum, come off of that with a little liter pump, and you're going to crush it.
Yeah.
You go to 600 lights, you go to 6,000 lights. You know, one of the stories that I kind of tell to just give scale is that 6-acre greenhouse I got there was an Argus system there. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. I spent most of my time working on it. And I spent years, you know, I love Argus from an environmental control standpoint. I kind of have a little bit of that old school appreciation because I worked it as a grower. It kept me alive, right? But Dosatron is what we replaced that system with. 2 big Dosatrons ran 6 acres. 2. And guess what's still in that 6 acres?
You had 2 recipes though.
No.
I don't understand. How did you run it with?
So you would run a base formula through your entire greenhouse, and then every boom had its own Dosatron. So then you'd do a base, which was like typically, let's call it about a 1.0 EC.
Okay.
Just a balanced formula. 20-10-20.
Gotcha.
Right? Run that out to everything. And then wherever a bay was, that boom would get its own Dosatron, and we'd add cal nitrate. We'd add 15-5-15. We'd add an acid formula for pansies or petunias, right? Long story short, those 2 Dosatrons ran that entire facility, right? Those 2 Dosatrons still run that entire facility
today.
That's 20 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
Same 2 Dosatrons. They've been rebuilt a couple of times, but same 2 Dosatrons. So that's where, you know, for me, scalability is not really the concern for Dosatron. There's a million ways to skin that cat. And I've spent many a time with growers trying to help them facilitate the right fit for their grow. But there's so many ways to do it. Now, in all practicality, Dosatron, it's how you cut it up. It's how so when someone like Sean puts out the 4, if we're fast forwarding a little bit.
Yeah, we could definitely fast forward. Sean, I saw that system at LA Family Farms, and Sean was installing it. And that's where I met Sean at Demeter Designs. And I called you right when I left LA Family Farms.
Yep, I remember that.
And I said, holy shit. Dosatron can run whatever you want it to run.
Yeah.
You just have to batch tank fertigation.
Yep.
Number 1. Do you want to explain what batch tank fertigation is?
100%.
Just for guys that don't know.
Yeah.
What is batch tank fertigation?
Yeah, I mean, there's really 2 methodologies of fertigation. There's making it in line and what we call inline delivery, right? Or direct. And then there's batch. Batch is creating a tank of nutrient solution that's ready to use, RTU. So a batch tank is taking off of any dosing system and filling to a tank. Now, let's be honest, doesn't have to have a dosing system either. A batch tank is what everybody's using when they have a tank.
Hand
and
mixing.
They go and hand mix,
Yeah.
and it comes out of there and goes straight through a liter or dab out to the room, right?
Yeah, so it's you're eliminating that human mixing those nutrients to make their batch tank.
That's right.
That Dosatron is just dosing that batch tank. So number 1, batch tank fertigation is what you need to run a whole facility. And number 2, you just dose your recipes.
Yes.
So as soon as I saw that, Sean's design, that's all Sean's deal. With Athena Pro line, you're running, he was doing 2EC, 3EC, veg, 3EC, and then 0.5 EC or 1 EC, depending on your flush.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have 4 dosing systems,
Yep.
can feed thousands of lights.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
Yeah. It just depends on the, flow rates and sizing of dosers and that, but do that appropriately and you're going to be off and running. And it could be 6 recipes, it can be whatever you want. But the nice thing is, and that's where Dosatron, people would come to me and when they saw Ivan's place, like I loved it when Ivan was like, hey, I'm going to put one per room. And we talked about it like at depth. And I was like, you're sure? He's like, yeah, man, I just want total flexibility. I want R&D capabilities. I'm strain hunting all the time. I'm doing all this work. If I'm going to put in all that work, I might as well just like go up on the CapEx and put a Dosatron system per room. So then everybody called me and was like, I got to put a Dosatron per room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can I explain to you maybe why you don't or why you do? So long story short, that comes full circle to where you call me and you're like, bro, revolutionary. What is this? And I was like, well, it's one of the many ways of doing it, right? And you're like, nah, this is the way. You need to tell everybody this is the way. I said, well, it's tough because there's so many different people that want to run so many different formulas, and it's rare that somebody only wants 4 batch tanks. And you're like, nah, watch. It's about to be standard.
Yeah.
Right?
And
I remember that. You were like, watch
Yeah.
this happen.
Yeah.
This is going to get.
So instead of you doing it, I think Sean, Ivan, and I did it. We're like, all right, we'll show everybody. We'll create Demeter Designs, and here it is. Here's your batch tank fertigation 4 recipes. 4 recipes.
100%.
It was pretty sick how that ended up.
Honestly, that precipitated out of a necessity again. It got to a point where Ivan felt it unsustainable once he had all those dosers. And don't forget, there's maintenance on a Dosatron. I know you Dosatron users may not think that, and everybody needs to hear
it's once a year, and it's like one little seal,
simple seals.
You just call
but it's still
and a little grease on something. I greased something, and clean it out.
So listen, I loved it from a sales standpoint, but from a sustainability standpoint, I will be honest that a lot of me was like, this has to change, right? Because not everybody can afford that, and not everybody can adopt that. We need this to be simplified, and so. My background in irrigation and automation allowed me to have that exposure, but it was a one-on-one. It was whoever was willing to listen. Because at the end of the day, again, I was still playing catch up. Every other phone call was somebody going, what is a Dosatron? What is fertigation? What is a batch tank? How does the pump work? What pump do I buy? What nutrients do I use? Well, how do I do this, Chris? Can you fly out here? I'll give you money if you come out here just to my grow. I'm like, man, you almost couldn't give me enough money because I'll lose my job at this point because I'm so busy.
Yeah.
So it was a great time, but it's again. I wish I could bottle that up, man.
It's like working the counter at a hydroponic store, and you get asked what pH is about 5 times a day.
Yeah. I felt like a broken record to the point where we started making those videos. So I could just be like, hey, do you mind go watch this video and then call me back?
Yeah.
Because at least it would give me half hour of my life back.
Let's talk about dilution solution.
Sure.
What is the major difference with the new dilution solution dosing system? We'll go into the controller in a bit.
Sure.
But with the dosing system, what's the major difference?
Well, by using the Editron, right, which is an electric pump versus a water-powered pump. A Dosatron has an inherent simplicity. That inherent simplicity has one setback in that you have to manually adjust the doser to change the recipe, right? So you walk up and you physically turn the dial to between 5 mils and 10 mils. You set it. It's going to repeat that. It's going to start the moment you turn it on. It's going to change to 10 mils. But you still have to physically have a human go change that. And that's where your recipe batching changed all that,
The
right?
4 dosers.
The 4 dosers. Now we got 4 recipes.
And that's
you don't touch the dosers.
Yep.
You just turn them on, you fill a tank, and from those tanks, you send it out to different rooms.
Yeah.
Right? Based on the crop life cycle. That's where real quickly I realized that the industry was going to shift. And coming from traditional horticulture, I already knew the difference between Dosatron users and full automation with like a Priva or an Argus. And so, we started with the Editron microdoser. I don't know if you remember that. I know you do.
I don't even want to talk about that thing.
Yeah. That was not Brandon's favorite, but it's because it wasn't easy enough for him.
No, I'm too dumb to use that thing.
No, let's be honest. It had its challenges. What I was trying to do. I remember at the time, Power SI The SI products were all
Yeah.
huge,
Yep.
right? Mammoth was coming on huge. Like these
Mhm.
products that just took, I just
1
want a
ml,
little tiny bit, a
half ml.
0.25,
Yeah.
half ml, 0.6. That was
Yeah.
Mammoth, 0.6. Well, I needed something to do it because the Dosatron, the 3000 only goes down to 1.25 mil or 1.14 if you want to be very exact. Well, because of that, we needed something that would microdose. Well, we brought the microdoser out. And to some people's pleasure, to other people's pain, right? What I realized real quick is like, I need a controller that's going to run this, right? I need something that's going to automate this. So really the Editron dosing system was born out of the idea that we'd be able to do recipe control and run one single system instead of the 4 banks and fill as many batch tanks as you want. I really tried, man. I didn't have every intention of going into the control world right away. I really tried to work with some of the control providers to just say, hey, use these dosers. Let me show you how to set them up. This is what you got to do. I even like to help them figure out essentially the math that it took to get there to program the controller for. And it's funny how people will use you for what they need for, and then jump on to something else, right? Real quick, just to be different.
Yeah.
And so real quick, I Pam and I were, let's do our own thing. And that's where, Pam, Ryan, and myself, all of us jumped in hard to developing a controller. Wasn't easy, man. It was a hell of a path. Went through a couple different really lame partners, let's just put it what it is, to get there. Because we're manufacturing a very simplistic product, and now we're going to go into the digital world.
And now you got to do software.
Software
is a nightmare.
And again, this is where I pinch myself, man. My life at Cherry Creek Systems born me into this. It gave me this opportunity to have vision greatly beyond most of my coworkers and most of the industry, because I was able to see down this path of development. I had developed 2 controllers, or been part of development of 2 controllers while at Cherry Creek Systems. And 3 of them actually, and one of them PLC based and one of them PCB based. And so we found a partner that was exactly what we wanted. And so fast forward that a little bit. That's where we have the Dilution Solutions controller, and that's what really kind of birthed that process. What I will say is that at that time, we developed it to work with Dosatron and with Editron, because I really wanted to go in and just be like, here's a controller for any dosing system you're using. Well, any of our dosing systems that you're using. Real quickly, I realized that, to put a high price controller on a Dosatron system can make some sense for some people and not for others. The value really came into recipe control. And so taking my background in irrigation, understanding, what everyone's calling crop steering now, which we didn't call crop steering back then, but understanding that basic knowledge long before this industry really adopted it, gave me that ability to realize that irrigation had to be on point. And so 2 years of development, right? So talk about not getting a hold of me. That was the other reason, right?
Yeah.
On top of sales. So we started hiring some people. Everybody knows Wally. Wally came on. That was a game changer for me, because it really allowed Pam and I to go behind closed doors and work on this controller. And so spent that time doing that, and have come kind of, leaps and bounds since 2018 when we started that. And we released it last year at MJ Biz, and have not looked back. We've got about 30 of them in the field and continuing to push forward,
Nice.
Yeah.
What separates the dilution solution controller aspect from a lot of the functionality of other controller systems?
Well, let's be honest. Controlled automation is all about data collection. Again, I go back to when we put this Dosatron together, we knew we wanted to monitor. At the time, there were a few trusted monitors in the industry. They were at a particular price point that made sense. We chose what we felt to be the brand leader at the time. Not going to give any shout outs there, but, decided to work with that group and develop an inline meter. There was no inline meters at the time. There was no inline meters. There was, but monitors, like all in one package. There was none off the shelf at that price point. So worked with a group to get that done. And that's where we realized, like, if we could capture that data repeatably, time after time, we'd be able to give people a historical breakdown of what their crop cycles look like coming off that Dosatron. Well, that platform didn't allow for that. So fast forward to the controller, one thing we really pegged in on was capturing that data in a way that is analytical and easy to report back to a grower and give them a nice view on what they're doing, what was successful and what was not successful. Capturing data is a huge part of controlled automation. Well, there's other people doing that already. The difference for us is we came at this different. You know what I do know is that environmental controls were where every control group started. I would beckon that there is not one control group I know of that started with fertigation besides Netafim. All right?
Yep.
It's the only one I know of. Most of them started with something else and said, oh, well, I can do dosing. It's easy. You just put some dosers and do some math, and I could do that. So our intention from day one was dosing, fertigation, irrigation. And so we came at it with a little bit of a different mindset. For example, we don't use a scheduler. We use something called plant days. Because I know we don't live on a Monday through Friday schedule. We live on a crop life cycle. And so our plant days allow you to do for a particular amount of time within the crop life cycle to do particular tasks, to perform particular tasks. And so that would be like, let's say you're going to get this recipe with this type of irrigation schedule for a couple of days. Then we're going to do a flush. Then we're going to go into this. Then we're going to do, right. So scaling into P1, P2, P3, what people are calling now with crop steering. Okay.
Irrigation strategy.
Correct.
So you can program in a 9-week cycle your recipes inside the dilution solution controller and let the program run.
You can.
That's awesome.
It's honestly at the time I felt it a bit revolutionary. But there's a caveat. Not everything goes perfectly every time, right? And so that's where, we have, we're building in features that we call ramping. Ramping is going to allow us to shift that. Let's say strain A versus strain B are going into a room and all of your historical data is on strain A. You pop strain B in there and you realize, damn, zone 2, which is strain B, just really it's not getting the pizzazz that strain A is off that particular strain or that particular schedule. Now we can go and ramp that based on, let's say, irrigation, based on recipe. When I say recipe, I'm talking about nutrient profile, and be able to adjust those accordingly to the plant's needs, right? And still leaving your program alone, your crop days stay stable so that, again, it's a repeatable recipe that you stick to, but then you're able to kind of adapt it day by day, shift by shift. It's the most important in greenhouse, right? When you're winter versus summer versus spring versus fall versus hot.
It's a lot harder to do
cold.
in a greenhouse.
Oh my gosh.
Way harder. Period.
Crop steering is incredibly hard. And that, because that's where I cut my teeth, right away, that was a target for us to understand that there has to be some adjustability. I want to be able to lay out the perfect recipe, what I think is a perfect recipe.
Based on the climate.
Based on all these various inputs.
Yeah.
But then knowing that things change, have the ability to shift that variable. Variable A, variable B.
So obviously you're going to be going eventually, if you're going to be monitoring climate, PPFD, energy to the canopy, you're definitely going to need to be monitoring substrate.
100%.
Is that where you're going, or are you looking to work with a partner to help with substrate monitoring?
So substrate monitoring was the largest target for during development of this controller. I used to work with a group called Decagon back in the day. Back in my Cherry Creek days, we put some wireless moisture controllers. Soil moisture probes that tied back to our controller wirelessly.
Decagon does blood glucose monitoring as well. Decagon.
Maybe.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah, do they? That's cool. But Decagon got bought by the company that owns Arroyo.
Gotcha.
right as we were finishing up this controller. So I was a little bit devastated. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh no. Then Arroyo was a platform already. And it was not a platform that I'm looking to replicate. Not that I wouldn't work with Arroyo customers, and we have a way to work with Arroyo customers right now. Absolutely. But it just wasn't this like, boom, I get a piece of hardware and now we can develop some software and we're going to work with this.
It's never like that.
No. So that didn't quite go as let's say the roadmap had. We were a little bit naive to think that it would be that easy. So we saw real rapidly all these companies coming on and talking crop steering, overusing the term, talking VPD, not even knowing what the hell it is. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to stick to my game a little bit. This is already harder than I thought it would be. We're going to perfect what we're good at, which is making the right recipe and sending it to the right place and making it easy. Our interface will crush any other interface out there. I'll challenge any of you guys on that, right?
Yeah.
That's where, to us, our interface it speaks volumes. You hop on that thing and within days of understanding that system and playing with it, within hours of training, you're in and you get it, right? So we stayed focused on that, and we still are focused on that, and we're going to continue to stay focused on the tweaks to what it looks like when substrate monitoring becomes a key factor to what we're doing, right? And so yeah, we're looking. We continually kind of keep the door open. Integration is very tough. I thought that would be easy and seamless. It's not. Not everybody wants to integrate the same way. Not everybody, people have paid platforms that you got to pay for in order to integrate with them. So again, we're minding our P's and Q's and trying to make sure that we pick the right partner. So yeah, substrate monitoring is going to be huge for us. And that's where like all those things with crop days and steering and triggering are going to come in.
Yeah, you need to have the media if you're going to be able to tell the controller to you have a proper irrigation strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's you have to have all the factors of the room. But
Correct.
I think what's missing is the substrate monitoring portion of it.
Yes.
That's, I guess, companies that aren't charging for it per square foot of your grow, and it's like a standardized something that plugs right in to your guys' controller
mm-hmm.
to give you that data. Now, are you guys saving your data? How does that data go? Do you give the customer the option to store their own data, or do you all store their data for them?
That's a great question. Their data is their data.
That's awesome.
We don't keep their data on some iCloud. The difference between what we developed, and again, we're lucky to have found the right partner that already had a pretty sick platform that they were in a very similar place, which is we keep that information local to that computer. It's a computer, and it's a Linux-based platform that allows us to keep all that information right there on their local hard drive. We don't cloud store it. We don't charge you to keep it. Now, we turn it over every 120 days, so you better report off of it. If you want more than 120 days, you report off of it.
Or get your own server.
Or get your own server that you can expand that.
Yeah.
And replicate that.
I think that's really big to be able to capture and save your own data and know that it doesn't go up into the cloud and it's being saved by some company you don't know.
That's the biggest problem I had with the monitoring that's out there. That's kind of standalone monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Is they're all just data mining.
Yes.
There was a particular seed platform or genetics platform that you may remember. We won't call it by name, but that particular genetics platform was data mining like crazy, and they got busted from a industry standpoint. They got busted, and the respect was gone instantaneously.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I watched
storing
that.
and saving everybody's
Storing
genetic.
and saving everybody's genetic profiles and building that metaverse or whatever it was. Metaverse is not the right word, but whatever
the bank.
The bank. That's what it was. Yeah.
And they're able to store it and save it with tissue culture and they do it at scale with a low labor cost. They just have the whole bank of genetics.
That's right.
For everybody.
And so anyway, with that, we decided that was not going to be a platform we wanted to follow. we wanted to allow growers control over their own information. That also makes it difficult to integrate, believe it or not. So that decision was impactful. I feel like it was the right decision for the grower. And so we have to continue to strive through that and work through that as our decision, because we're going to stick to it. It's embedded in what we do. So there's going to be some, increased viability to the moisture or media content information that we're going to be able to use just about anybody's sensors to capture that information. We also have a browser that was like inherent to this thing too, right? Where people can put on their platform, whatever X platform they're using, they can save that page right there, and it's right in the center of the controller. So you click on that on the toolbar, and bam, right there is your platform. So you can navigate through your platform, come over, change your irrigation strategies. So it's not automated yet, but with time that will be. Because to your point, it's not just about irrigation. It's not just about those substrate monitors. That is one tool in the key element of a multiverse of tools. And that multiverse of tools is going to capture VPD. It's going to capture rad sum. It's going to capture all of these variables that are really part of irrigation. Irrigation is not just about putting water and nutrients on plants.
Absolutely. But it seems like substrate monitoring is that's like the last piece that's not standardized right now. It's owned by a few companies, but it's not widely available. And
That's
it's
right.
very quietly different when you move from certain substrate monitoring companies to others. One will say you're at 30% water content, and the others will say 50 or 45 with the same exact meter.
Yes.
It's not standardized, and it's not free. Like that's the most unfortunate part, is that they're trying to charge you, cannabis tax you on something that you should just be able to buy the hardware, plug it in and use it, and pay a small $39 subscription fee and get it for free. Like, why do you have to cannabis tax us on everything? You know, it's just, it gets old.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's kind of like the missing last link, right, for the whole thing to work.
Yep.
Because we got many choices when it comes to climate, CO2, humidity, temp, PPFD, DLI. We got many choices, and we don't have that many when it comes to substrate monitoring that are standardized and cost effective, in my opinion.
Yes, and that's because of capitalism, and I love capitalism. Right, I'm an American. I believe in it at its core, but capitalism can be poisonous, and it leads people to be greedy. And so, what could be great for this industry has become somewhat of a let's gobble it up and take it and keep it on the side. And I'm not talking about one particular company. That's a lot of them.
Yeah,
and it's not just substrate monitoring. It's sensors. It's not just sensors, it's platforms.
Yeah.
So for me, this is where the passion that we talked about earlier has to continue to be a driving factor, because it's so easy to let business take over. And, you and I have talked about the difference between being a cultivator and being a businessman, and how important it is that we drive the steering wheel as a cultivator. The businessman sits in the passenger seat.
You got to control the
business. He can navigate all he wants.
Yeah.
He can tell you where you think you're supposed to go, but that cultivator knows what to do. That's right.
Exactly.
So, being a cultivator first is so important to me, and to our company. I mean, honestly, the reason that Leela was so successful, to go all the way back to that, she was a grower, dude. She worked in the greenhouse. So, and in all of our other industries, there's someone that has had some experience. Our car wash group is run by a guy that used to own car washes.
Yeah.
So, and that's what people don't realize about Dosatron. We do it all, man.
Yeah. There's
chemistry and water.
There's a balance between taking advantage and doing what's best for the community and the cultivator.
Yeah.
There's a balance, right? You got to be able to pay your employees, keep the lights on, make a small profit for your family, and and support the company, and make the company strong financially. But there's the balance of too much, right? And you just got to find that balance and always do what's right, best for the cultivator at the end of the day. When you're making people successful, you'll be successful. That's how we run this company.
It's absolutely true.
You know, you focus on other people's success first, and success will eventually come, right?
You know, one of the greatest things I ever heard in my life, and it, if you really embed it in your life, it goes across all platforms. And that is, you were given 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah.
You're supposed to look and listen twice as much as you speak.
100%.
And so if we can look and listen and understand what cultivators need, man, what comes out of our mouth can be gold, right? Because then at the end of the day, our trajectory will put us right in front of the grower, right? It'll put us right in front of the place where the pulse is happening. And that's where I feel like, you know, being a cultivator or being a plant geek, because really, I mean, outside of being, I haven't done large scale cannabis cultivation. You know, that's one thing I have to be very clear about. Growing weed in the basement, yeah, I mean, I had 4 or 5. So let's say I have 50 lights. That's not large scale cultivation to the world we live in now. But given my background with you know, growing bedding plants and tomatoes, it's just allowed me a little bit of that understanding of what it's like to sweat your ass off and wait for somebody's phone call because your machine's down. You know?
Yeah, or be fed the wrong information and it costs you your crop, or causes all kinds of clogged drippers and pH flux in your root zone, and you're like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Like, why did he tell me to do this?
Oh man, there was this hydro store at home that did that to me one time with I won't call it a name brand, but a particular brand came out and was just the only brand that was really pushing cannabis. And gave me a bunch of stuff. It was like, try this, do this, do that. And bro, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare. And I didn't know, because again, I'm running, you know, GH3 part at the time. Simple. You know, some diamond nectar to get some aminos or whatever.
Yeah.
But I didn't want all that brown sludge. And they introduced that to me. And man, I dealt with so many problems to where I had to peel back and go back to basics.
Yeah. Giving out knowledge in this industry, people's families, people's businesses, people's lives rely on the knowledge you give them. So when you give it, it better be right.
Mm-hmm.
You better know what you're doing, and you better check up on what knowledge you're giving out. And that's
100% true.
It's so vital. I think Athena has been a big disruptor in the industry. It's changed a lot of things. You know, it's changed my garden. It's changed, you know, my gardens. It's changed the way I cultivate. And it's cool. It's cool to be the disruptor and to tell the truth. It's like, this is what it is. You know, take it or leave it. It's from this university backed by this guy, or, you know, this other university backed by this guy. It's like, these are the facts. Like, take it or leave it. So it's,
yeah, it's I like that word disruptor a little bit. You know, to me, I like it a lot, actually, because to me, that's what it takes to put your foothold and to make things a little different. Because yeah, just to do it the way that everyone's doing it, number one, is not going to get you the same results.
yep.
Because yeah, people have a way of shedding information like it's, to your point, like it's gospel. And man, so often I hear advice that's just so bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the best part about being at Dosatron has been the fact that I get to, you know, I get to share experiences, and I get to tell people what works, but I always do it with a grain of salt. Every bit of advice I've ever given, right? even going back to when we sat down with Brent, when I first met Brent, we're talking about greenhouses, and you're talking about acre feet, uh, or
Acre feet
acre feet and acre
of
inches of
water.
water.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
didn't
like,
even know what that was.
yeah, yeah, and we're talking about what that's going to look like, and how much water you're going to need. It's like, well, man, that is a loaded question. You could be the guy that does 30 flush cycles a week because you don't know how to grow. Not you, but giving anybody that advice. You can't just go and give somebody advice. How much water am I going to use? Well, I mean, you
Yeah.
could, if you're good, you should use as little as you possibly can. So, yeah, giving just shotgun advice in this industry, and hence I go back to, I guess I'll make excuses all day long as to why I was hard to get a hold of, man, because I spent time on the phone trying to really help people because I cared. Because at the end of the day, Brandon, I knew that quick 5 minute, yeah, just do the same as the guy down the street.
Yeah.
Wasn't right. So take it for what it's worth, man. At the end of the day, I'm going to put all of my heart and effort into making your garden grow. And if you care as much as I do about what we're doing, man, I'll put in, undying hours to just get to that point of seeing success.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it was an honor. I
thanks,
appreciate
brother.
your friendship.
Yeah, man.
We go back,
Hell yeah.
talking about these stories, we go back quite a long way.
Yeah.
And it's really
Yeah.
cool to reflect on it.
It is.
So
It's crazy to think that, 8 years is a lifetime at this point.
yeah,
In this industry, 8 years is a lifetime, Brandon.
lots happened.
When you hear the stories of people that started in the 90s, like I used to think it was cool. I could say 99. I started in 99.
Ganny Farmer comes whenever everybody says like, oh, I started in 1990. I'm like, Ganny Farmer just pops in my head. Dude started
100%.
in 91.
100%.
I'm psyched.
He's a J. That's where I get my personal from, at home.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You get it from Bart?
Yeah, he's
That's
my boy,
rad.
bro. Love
That's
that
rad.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Super cool
it's
cat.
my favorite. It's one of my favorite smokes there is.
Yeah.
And the dude is so humble. He's the nicest freaking guy, and he's as real as they come.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm just lucky he lives in my hometown.
That's super cool.
And
I had no idea.
Yeah, we met at MJ Biz. I don't know.
Did he go to dinner with
4
us?
years ago.
Oh, okay.
This was the Lux party.
Yeah, this was that dinner with us. We brought Ganny
Yeah.
Farmer in. We're eating, some gummy bears.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those were great.
Yeah, that was so that was, I don't know, 4 years ago.
Yeah, the Lux party.
And man, that was, it actually changed my life, because man, I had to drive to Denver to get her, So yeah, it's pretty nice to have it right there in the backyard. But yeah, man, I appreciate you having me, man, because honestly, for me, just to be able to tell my story is cool. I think people think of me as Chris Dosatron. I mean, remember I used to wear that same blue shirt everywhere I went for years.
But do you have it on
The
right
blue,
now?
the blue polo. It's a little different now. It's a little. I stepped up my game a little bit.
Damn, button up.
Right, I know, button up now.
Yeah.
But I wear that blue polo everywhere, and I remember for so long people would be like, "Dude, you in that blue
What's up
shirt?"
with the polo?
Yeah, and it's funny. I meant to bring Dosey on. I forgot to grab him out of my backpack. But Dosey
I'm
was.
glad you left it in the car.
Yeah. But Dosey was my imprint. I'd go to a place, I'd leave a Dosey.
I'd drop it off, be like, Chris has been here.
You know I was there. You walk through a place, you see a Dosey, I've been there, right?
That's awesome.
But yeah, man, it just to be here is cool. And
you're the only industry dude that wears a button up or a collared shirt in our industry.
It's probably true, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, with a flat bill hat.
Well, you got a light hat. We all wear dark hats.
That's true, huh?
Dark hats, dark shirt. That's how you know.
Well, it's funny too, because like I said, being a metalhead my whole life, like black was where I was at, know. And it's funny because the guys in my band used to call me the Kimple Soup Kid, because I'd get up there and put my bass on and jam around with some black clothes on, but I still had, a kid face, and they'd laugh. They'd be like, "Dude, you don't fit, but you get on that stage and something happens, right?" So, same thing today, man. I feel like but that's the best part about my life now, man. If I may say, let me end with this. This job, working for Dosatron, allowed me to be me, because I spent decades not being myself, or a decade not being myself, because I had to show up to work every day and be someone else. And though I was, characteristically myself. It's not like I had a different voice or acted different, but I couldn't talk about my life.
Yeah.
I couldn't be homies with any of my customers because I couldn't tell them about my band or about growing cannabis, about the things I was passionate about. And so being with Dosatron has allowed me to be me. And the greatest gift I was given by that family was that opportunity. And, the best thing I can say about Pam and working there is that she embraces that. She's the one that's like, why aren't you out there doing podcasts? Why aren't you out there doing more? And honestly, it's just because to me, it's about being with the growers.
Yeah.
I'm not all about the face, man. I just want to be with the growers. I just want to be, one of you guys.
Yeah.
So this industry has adopted me and made me feel like this is who I was supposed to be. Like I worked this whole full circle in my life, like going through and being at the greenhouse and working at my father-in-law's company and being at Cherry Creek Systems and coming full circle to Dosatron. It almost feels like a book has been written. And so I feel fortunate just to have had the experiences we've had together, to have had the experiences I've had with all the growers out there that have adopted Dosatron and really brought us into to their family. And so I can be nothing but appreciative of what's going, what the past is given and what the future holds. Because man, as tough as it is right now, price per pound is down.
Yeah.
People are screaming that they're not making money right now. I'm so fortunate to be in a position where I provide a tool that helps you in your business thrive.
Become efficient.
And, if I can help people make money and instill a little bit of my given knowledge, whether it's IPM, whether it's, process, whether it's actually what I get paid to do, which is fertigation, I feel fortunate, man, because the growers in this industry, I've never felt more part of a family in my life than to do what we do.
Yeah.
And so people like Ganny, I mean, again, I live in his hometown. We figured that out. Dude invites me over and we're family. Ivan brings me in. We're homies for life, right? Roach, I mean, those guys have been nothing but great to me. So yeah, man, I'm super thankful. I love what we do and I'm excited to keep doing it, man. I'm excited to keep doing it.
Much love, much respect,
Much love,
brother.
Goes both
Appreciate
ways.
you, bro.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right. See you.
Later, bro.